Recording. Good to go. Right. Okay, folks. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a minute. Each one of your seats. You got your seats. Everybody wants to come around the table too. All right. Well, thank you everybody for being here. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a minute and call your attention to the little prompt question that we've got here. And we're going to put it up on screen too. We're going to do introductions, but we also want to know, there was so much outreach that happened this summer. We want to know, what do you think was most effective for the Compass Navigation outreach? Was it some of the coffee with council? Was it all the block parties? Was it the design charrette that happened last week? Was it all of the above? So we want to make sure that we're focusing staff efforts on what's most effective, of course. So we want to go ahead and do introductions, name any organization that you're affiliated with, and what you thought was most effective. And I'd like to give the mayor the honor to convene us and welcome us.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you all for participating in the process. And I'd also like to note how we translate your input into sort of the bigger picture is a very complicated thing, and it's can be frustrating because it's like, oh, I provided this comment and I don't see how it affected things. The reality is that your participation really does have an impact. It has an impact in really complicated ways, and it's a leap of faith, right? So it's a leap of faith that by investing time that you're going to make our community better. And I'll just emphasize, we accomplished Red Lady this summer. That was a 50-year process. We as a community came together and we made something positive happen. And that was a leap of faith. So, Flo and Sue and Jim and a lot of the people that have been involved in this community, when they decided to commit to that, there was no guarantee that 50 years later our community was going to be better because of that. And it's the same leap of faith that you all are taking, which is you're going to invest your time. It's making sausage. Maybe some of the comments that you give us, they don't show up immediately. Maybe they show up 50 years later, sort of recreated in a way that makes this community better. So anyway, I just want to thank you all for the leap of faith that you're making. It can be super frustrating. There can be things that it's like, oh, I wanted that and I didn't get that. It still makes our community better. Know that the council members read those comments. I've already been going through the comments that individuals are making. I know the other council members are doing that. So know that the time you invest really makes a difference, and it's appreciated, and it's a leap of faith, and we appreciate you taking that leap of faith. Thanks, Monica.
And I'll follow suit and introduce myself. I'm Miles Graham. This is obviously our third meeting of the Navigation Committee. I'm here to help facilitate again. As a reminder, I'm based out of Ridgeway, and always a pleasure to be here. In terms of what's most effective, I'm a big believer in there's no magic wand or silver bullet that does everything when it comes to outreach. It's all of the above that really makes it effective. So with that, let's do some introductions, and Gabi, can we start with you, and we'll do the back and come to the
Gabi Prohaska, City Council. Beth Goldstone, City Council.
And Gabi and Beth, what did you think was most effective?
We're supposed to answer the question right now. I actually, I think the block parties brought a different kind of engagement. I talked to a lot of people who were like, oh, I met neighbors I had never seen before or had seen but had never talked to. And so I think the survey gets at some specifics and it lets you anonymously say your piece, but I think the block parties were really interesting.
Yeah, I'll agree, because they also kind of sparked later conversations, I think, with people, and just got more people seeing them and more people learning and willing to have conversations.
I'm Cal Fennerty, on the transportation committee. I think the design track was really good, just in terms of numbers of people there, and just kind of making it real. Like this is what we're talking about, and thought they're pretty good.
we're gonna go deeper into the design charrette materials today, and Jessica.
Yeah, I'm Jessica. I work for the Crested Bank. I'm on the community. I really like the block parties as well. I thought that got a broad range of information out there, and then the surveys and the charrettes definitely honed in on. I think getting.
Ed Schmidt, from Mozart, and position. I like the detail on being survey.
Jim Starr, on the Unity Plan Committee, and follow the Coke Watershed Coalition, the Democratic Party here in the county. I thought the block parties were very effective, in part because people could actually point at things and point at views from their neighborhoods and talk about those and different aspects of those views. Also thought the last session, which unfortunately was the only session I could make at the center last week, was very helpful and informative as well.
I'm Kent Calvert, Town Council, on the Community Plan Committee as well. I thought the charrette was just awesome. I come from that background, so seeing that kind of creative studio with, tracing paper, magic markers, and creative alternatives happening is really exciting for me. I wish the coffee with the councils would be more well attended. I only had a couple people come, and they were familiar faces, so I didn't see great.
Good.
Chris Hensley, town resident, also work with the Adaptive Sports Center and sort of on the transportation side of things. Unfortunately, I didn't make any of the block parties. I read a lot of the letters in CP News. I felt like the individual, and I just tried to engage a lot of individuals, especially about the parking. There's a lot of there, and I felt like it was talking people out of and also explaining down the accessibility side of what we were trying to do. But I think once you engage them individually, there was more understanding, and people calm down a little bit.
And a good reminder too of just the importance of this group and helping being that connection point between the process and the community. Thank you.
Glo Cunningham, I was on the transportation, kind of involved in the museum and the 1% for open space. So I found the block parties to be the best. I only got 2 of them, of 4, but I thought they were really good. I think what Jim was saying about people talking, interacting, and got to know a couple people's names whose faces I'd seen for quite a long time. I was not a fan of the charrette in any way, shape, or form. I went in there kind of open-minded and came out there irritated. Just me.
Thanks for that feedback. And hopefully today we'll go a little bit deeper and peel back that onion a little bit more. So.
I'm Giza Michael. I am on the Climate Action Committee, and with regards to the outreach, I was very impressed about the responses from the survey. I think there were and comments, people making comments, so that was kind of what I thought. So that.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hey, yeah, Lolita, on the Climate Action Planning Steering Committee, also running for Mount CD Town Council, and I found the survey to be impactful, but I also want to just highlight that I feel like having the compass meetings and having each of these different planning committees with involvement from town council, from members of the community that have some insight, has been, just a really great way to involve us, and we can talk about it to individuals, like you were saying, which I think is really can be fantastic.
Nicole, I'm also on the Climate Action Committee, and I'm involved in the Crested Coalition, sit on their community engagement committee, chair of that committee. Overall, I really liked that the town of Crested took so many different avenues. We had a number of conversations out there, right over here stuff and, different age groups and different pockets of our community of people like lodging various complaints, having to do with tourism events or this not happening. And like I said, actually, they're doing this, and they're doing a ton. And a lot of people give me kind of a surprised look. And so I think with a multi-tiered approach just shows a lot of effort that can't really be argued with. And I really enjoyed the charrette, actually. It might be the way that my brain works, but having like the different models show up on the screen, it's like, this is what's possible. We could do this, we could do that. Here's why, here's the pros and cons of this model, that model. Here's what can happen if we do nothing. I found that to be incredibly eye-opening, and having the visuals was super key. And I've been telling a lot of people around town about the charrette part that I attended, and so I think there's some people out there who are eager to get the video, which Mel knows. And then it's really important that they listen to the audio like that, because if you just look at these slides that come through without understanding, and I felt we got a thorough explanation of why this model, what's behind it, what are some alternatives, what are the pros and cons of each. It highlights that there's no perfect answer here, everything is give and take. So I walked away with. Surveys I think are good, at least when I was filling out the surveys, and a few discussions we had in our climate action plan group, is that some of the questions could be interpreted in so many different ways. And so I found the surveys to be pretty limiting in that way, and when I did the surveys, there was a number of them I answered, I don't feel like I have enough information on this, because I don't really understand the impacts. Like when I did some of the surveys that were not related to the climate change grid. So we don't know what was in folks' minds when they answered some of those questions.
Great, yeah. Yeah.
Roxanna, I'm Bozar, on the committee. I don't know what would be motivated. I would say, firstly, they're all necessary because people participate in different ways and their different abilities of contributing. I would agree with Nicole's statement. I always find surveys extremely limited because I think what you really want to say kind of gets structured by the question. But the block parties, I had a similar experience to what Nicole said. I thought they allow people to engage in a different way. I mean, the charrette's great, and the other event that we have in the center, but those are kind of like passive taking in of information versus being able to engage with someone and really actively ask questions. And so like go through your own thought process of how things are unfolding and how you can participate. But again, they're all valuable. They all serve a different purpose. So
Yeah.
I'm there, I've been on the community plan committee. I found the design charrette to be very useful. I thought I didn't make it to any block parties. Working, kidding, all summer. So, since all of you were saying they were so amazing, I'm sorry that I missed it. But I thought the biggest takeaway that we need to communicate to the community about the design charrette is we're not doing this. Like the town isn't like building all these buildings tomorrow. Like if this is what town could look like and how can we steer it in the way that we want to through code. This, so like the one slide that I feel like people who've lived here a long time are like, was the one with the, like across from Gothic Field right over here with like the big building. But when the town staff was like, well, this is already allowed. So somebody could build this tomorrow. Do we want them to, if they do build it, do we want to make sure that there's some affordable housing in there? Yes. We want to steer how it looks or steer how it, because it's already allowed. So I think when you're going to send out a video about the charrette,
Yeah, we're also gonna get really deep into that today, and we're recording today also. So lots more to come on that. Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think all the talk about Bellevue was like super awesome. Just rethink what we can do with the whole area of town. And I love the community engagement aspect of that, like, I did feel like I wasn't just like sitting there passive, I actually felt like when we did our breakout groups, we all started to talk about the different areas of town. I came on the Monday.
Thank you so much. And like Mel said, we are going to be going deeper into the Shrek content today, and I'm not making any decisions, but I think you said it really well that, you know, we're not doing this tomorrow. This is what town could look like, and how do we shape it? And so that's going to be a lot of the discussion today. So thank you for that. And let's see.
I'm Jessie Early, and I work for the town of Crested, Butte, and the project manager for the historic preservation thing. And I would kind of tailor on to what Nicole said, just, I think the wide variety of the different things that the town has done, and I've heard from our consultants for the historic preservation plan, but also the state historic preservation office, just that they've never seen a community do so many different things and ways to try and reach people. And it was specific to the historic preservation plan, but I've been talking to them about the other things we've been doing, like the design charrette, and they just are blown away. So
Yeah, it's no doubt impressive. Troy.
Troy with community development, I sort of echo Roxanne, we can't do enough. In terms of, I find the most successful was when I was surrounded on the bus, on the block parties. And just the very healthy conversations that were going on in there it just allows staff to really understand if you do that. But just reminder, what's not, I don't know, is poetry night on there is, I mean, Dana and Maddie and what she's brought, Mel, and just the wide variety. We need to do better. We're never, in my 35 years of planning, the one constant is you've got to do outreach better. And so I'm glad the Historic Preservation Office of the state has said that, because we're trying, but we're not there yet. We go to the Friday afternoon, but if you guys have any way to suggest we can do better, we are all ears. I'm very happy with what we've done, but we can always do better.
Hi everyone, I'm Mel Yema. I would agree with what everyone has said, and I think we've gotten some great feedback this summer that we'll get into in a little bit. I think for me, what I found to be most helpful was any of the opportunities for kind of one-on-one or face-to-face interaction. So whether it was conversations at the block parties, the office, at the studio hours, at the charrette, even the coffee with councils or the tabling, even though they were smaller attendance, any of that, not only did we get really good feedback, but it was a really great way to just really start building more and more trust with people. The more face-to-face interaction outside of Facebook and other mechanisms, I think, is really helpful to build more trust and buy-in to keep participating in these processes.
Hi, I'm Dara, town manager. I'm just listening for an hour or so and then have meetings, but thanks everyone for being here. I thought charrette block parties, I think the coffee with the council is gonna be a slow build. It'll keep that engagement going, and keep that access to council members and staff, sort of that expectation that we've created in the communities. That's one way I think we'll keep that going.
And I quickly want to recognize we have two team members online with us today, Maddie and Dana. So Maddie or Dana, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Hey everybody, apologies I couldn't be with you in
We're not hearing. Oh, one second. It might be me. I apologize.
Hear us.
Dana, try again.
Can you hear me now?
Oh no. Why does this always happen? Dana, you can hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
No, we can't hear you.
Write down a comment.
Yeah.
Go to
Audio. Microphone.
speakers.
Speakers. Try again, Dana.
Can you hear me?
Yay, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. All right.
Sorry for the tech. I apologize. I can't be with you there in person today. I'm not feeling very well, but yeah, my name is Dana. I'm the sustainability coordinator for the town, and I'm the project manager for the climate action plan. What impressed me most about this summer is that the town, I think, really made an effort to go to people. It's really easy as staff, and I think in a lot of municipalities, outreach is focused around come to council meetings and get the information from us in our space. But going out to people and like for me, being able to have those conversations face to face and answer questions was, I think, super impactful, and hopefully, like I'll echo Mel, like a trust building exercise. So that's what I thought was most impactful.
Thanks, Dana. And Maddie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Maddie. Hopefully I'm being heard, correct?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Maddie. I'm with the Community Development Department. I know a handful of people have already said it, but I most appreciated the diversity of the events and all the different ways we tried to reach out to people in person, online, and having events associated with each plan too, for those who want to deep dive. I think it's been a great opportunity to touch as many people and hear from as many people in Crested Butte as possible. But I do want to throw out there, if anyone else has creative ideas moving forward about engagement, I know the block parties was just a council member's idea. So if I always want to hear about other creative ways that we can reach more, because like Troy said, there's always more people out there who have an opinion to share who maybe don't feel like they've had the chance yet. So
Thank you so much, and thank you all for your input on this. And I think as we've heard, it takes all of those different outreach avenues to communicate with all the different ways people process information. And so on the block parties too, I know anytime this community gets together and gathers, there's so much energy, so much inspiration, so much pride in the community that it's bound to be a good time. So thank you all, and I just want to acknowledge this group and the role you all play in helping to get the word out and steer this process. And so let's get into meeting purpose, because today is going to look a little bit different than some of our previous meetings. We want to make sure what we're going to be doing at all of the meetings is give quick updates on the plans and any questions that you have. Plan specific, we're not going to spend a lot of time, but want to make sure you all know where we're at in the evolution of all those plans. We're really then going to turn our attention to understanding the community plan, the tools that the community plan has, and that emerging vision that's coming together. We want to make sure that we're really aligning with you all and giving you time to process that. As many of you mentioned with the charrette, there's a lot of information there. And I know every time I see the charrette presentation, I notice new things, and taking time to ruminate on that, not making any decisions today, but really checking in with you all so you can be that steering committee for this process. If you identify areas that don't feel connected to our values, how do we start to identify those trade-offs? We may not solve them today, we probably won't, but we want to make sure we're mapping those out, we're identifying them so we can work on those. And then also, where are we moving in the right direction? What does feel connected to our values? Not necessarily from an individual perspective, but from a community perspective. What changes are we looking at, and how are we managing changes that are inevitable in a way that reflects our community values? So we're not going to break out today. We're going to do more of a roundtable discussion so we can all listen to each other, listen deeply, and also speak and just ruminate on the directionality of where we're headed, because we're not in a decision-making place, but we are in a really important place to check in on the direction that we're heading as a group and as a community. And Troy and Mel, is there anything more on that piece that you'd like to say?
Well, I made transitions to my slides, so if you're done with the agenda, that's
well,
great.
we'll go agenda first on purpose. I wanted to make sure I got the intent of the discussion.
Right.
Cool. And as I said, trade-offs are inherent. We're going to be working through those. Next slide, you've all seen the agenda in your packet. But we're going to go through the plan updates. We're going to do some Q&A there. We kind of got the parking lots already built for plan specific questions that are no doubt going to be big issues that we're going to need to probably put in the parking lots, so we can address those at many of the upcoming opportunities in the future. And then kind of our trade-offs and intertwined connections, just beginning to map those out as we go through all the plans too. So we'll do that fairly quickly, about 9:45, probably closer to 10-ish now. We'll get into moving into the community plan, and that's where we're gonna spend the bulk of the time today. We're gonna go through an abbreviated version of what was presented on Friday at the design charrette, and then we're just gonna roundtable and discuss. So that's the agenda. It's pretty simple. We're gonna check in at the end on where we go from here. Public comment, as always, is gonna be welcome. I don't see anybody online or in the room, obviously. So we want to make sure we save that space for all of these meetings, and then we'll do our optional lunch from noon to 1. We'll sit down, break bread, and have a chance to discuss further for those of you sitting around. So that's our meeting, and then Troy will give us our moment to connect to our values.
Well, this is just a reminder why we have a navigation committee this meeting. Each of you are representing different plans and advocating for those plans. And as a resident, you have a personal concern, which we all want to hear. But the goal of this plan is just, as Miles is reminding us, we're looking at it from a community perspective. And how do we balance what is affordable housing and climate action and historic preservation and transportation? They're not always aligned. So how do we move forward with the best interests of the community? Hearing your voice, and more importantly, speaking your concerns so everyone else can hear your voice. We're going to start balancing that this process will work. If you're committed to it, you're passionate about your personal concerns, you understand the plan you're representing to advocate for that plan, and then you're putting it in perspective with every other plan. And so just living by the values of this community, living by your personal core values and blending the two, it's hard. This is gonna get hard. And stay engaged, and it's going to be a wonderful outcome. And I think the mayor put it in good perspective. Your voice matters. When that is heard, how it is documented, the more you participate, the more it's going to be integrated. But we have to balance everyone's concerns. And we want you to hold us accountable that we make sure we reflect the community's needs. We may try to get your individual concerns documented and internet integrated, but we're also intentionally trading off everyone's concerns. But we need you to hold us accountable, make sure we're reflecting what this committee and your advisory committees are doing. So I just want to thank you for being here. Outreach is hard. It's only going to get harder. You're welcome.
Yeah, it's hard work, and it's work that never stops. So I think Mel, you're gonna walk us through a little bit of what we heard this summer.
Yeah, so we're gonna move into updates on Compass navigation and all of the plans and where they're at. So I'd love to start out with a summer outreach update, and thank you all so much for that feedback and takeaways from the outreach this summer. As discussed, we did so many different things and had a lot of great different levels of participation in each. So these are just some of the key numbers on what we had, from 238 survey responses to 40 to 60 participants for block parties. We got a lot of great targeted feedback through all of those events, and some big picture themes really emerged. We really heard doing nothing is not an option on the survey. Almost everything was like, let's take more action. We got to take more action. We've also recognized through all the conversations through the survey, through this committee, that complex challenges require tailored solutions. We're not looking at broad brush changes across the full town. Transportation, climate action, and affordable housing are all priorities, but they're not the only priorities. And that's why we're here. We're looking at those trade-offs and how all those different important things to the community can work together. Trade-offs are everywhere, and the devil is really in the details and how we solve it. I can't tell you how many of the boards from the block parties all said we want more parking and less traffic and cars. That is just such a good example of how trade-offs are required, and we're really starting to get now into the details of each plan to really look at how can we look at those trade-offs and make sure we can align with our values. And then lastly, our community is connected and engaged. It really was amazing to see new faces, whether in the survey or at the charrette or at the block parties. Our giveaway winner for the survey was a name I had never seen at a meeting before, and that just makes me so excited every time we can engage with new people. So it's really awesome to see how connected and engaged our community is. And you might be asking, how do we use your feedback? I really appreciated Mayor Billick's introduction this morning. It's not always cut and dry and easy. You might say, I really want head-in parking on 5th Street, and they made it parallel. It can be really messy and a lot of sausage making, but your feedback is so important. This summer was really helpful, number one, to first educate the community on the different planning efforts and implementation going on, some misconceptions out there that had to be resolved. But also all that feedback and conversations really helps us improve our framing and messaging. For anyone who did attend like the full week of the charrette, I think Kent was there, all the active feedback we got during the week really helped us, hey, how can we improve this Wednesday night? How can we improve this Friday night? From Friday to today, really always looking at what is your feedback and how can we better improve on how we message and frame things. But all the feedback also really informed a lot of specific things. Troy's going to talk about how feedback informed winter parking management decision from this past Monday. Feedback from the block parties is informing future traffic calming refinement. All the feedback from the survey helped to refine the recommended historic preservation plan strategy, which Jesse's going to talk about. It helped develop and prioritize climate action plan alternative actions, which Dana will talk about. And then lastly, it really helped us develop community plan success measures and frame the charrette considerations, which we'll be getting into as well today. And here's a quick update on where every plan is at. We're going to run through a quick update on each plan, but we're now pretty far along where community plan and climate action plan are in that alternative stage of the compass. Historic preservation plan is refined in on one recommended alternative, and after this meeting, we'll be moving more into the adoption phase. And then the transportation plan ongoing implementation. Remember, 20 years of actions with that one, so lots more feedback to come. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Troy to give us an update on the transportation plan.
Thanks, Mel. And just to reiterate, we're blending things. So the outreach was way more than the navigation meetings. A lot of it led by the creative thinking of Maddie and Mel in terms of each of the individual plans also had outreach. Mel presented sort of the navigation outreach, but preservation had its own meetings, climate action had its own meetings. And we intentionally wanted to remind people transportation's ongoing. It's not an answer. It's how do you implement it? What's the pace? We haven't heard anyone say they disagree with the intent. We certainly have differing opinions on the pace of how those things are happening. And I just want to go over that the outreach really has informed the implementation. I don't think it has changed anything in the intent of the transportation plan, but the council was very clear. They wanted the block parties to inform not only the navigation effort, but the individual implementation actions of the transportation plan itself. So everything is ongoing. So council just directed council this last Monday night to modify the pace of implementation and really make sure we're continuing to provide alternative modes of transportation before we sort of manage parking in a more aggressive way. But they also reminded us that the quality of our neighborhoods are really important and we don't want them overwhelmed by cars. So how do you do that? And I think council came up with a wonderful solution. So what's happening is new in the transportation plan is really up at Butte and Teocalli, 500 feet around the Butte bus stop or the Teocalli bus stop at Mountain Express, and then Maroon and Sopris just east of the four-way. And it's really saying, hey, those neighborhoods are important to us. And we know they're starting to get overwhelmed, but let's get real data and let's really understand that. And so let's let everyone in the county who depends on those areas to get to the mountain and resort or come on and continue on to Elk Avenue to really have a chance. Let them register with our parking permit free and get a ski parking permit to park on those streets. So on a powder day, on a holiday, if the four-way's full, they can certainly park there and we can get better data because then we can track it more wholly. And then can we do that until the roundabout at Red Lady gets constructed so the school could be an active partner if we start reducing parking around those areas? Can Red Lady roundabout help us get buses to the school to use that as a reserve lot? Or can the roundabout at Brush Creek, which creates the space for a Brush Creek parking lot, help us manage the balance between transportation and livability in town? Because there is a paradox in town. How we manage parking is a great concern of the residents, but the number one concern that we still hear is there's too many cars in town. And so it's how do you balance those things? And so we're going intently, deliberately slow into making sure we have alternatives to any actions. And if I could present just one more, Lolita, and then I'll let you jump in. So on that front, you may or may not know, the county worked with the town actively and the city of Gunnison, and we received a Safe Route to Street funding, $15 million from the feds that actually helped fund the Red Lady Roundabout, the Brush Creek Roundabout, Cement Creek Roundabout, rumble strips along the corridor, and a whole bunch of pedestrian improvements in the city of Gunnison, including Tiamici and Main Street, right at 50 and 135. But with that, that enables a lot of the parking conversations to also be blended in because it creates that possibility. And so we're ongoing with the roundabout. We're working with CDOT now to finalize. They've given us this first draft of an access permit. Once we finalize that, we will proceed into RFP and start the design. So next year we'll be designing it and all the particulars of the Red Lady Roundabout. How many legs does it have? How do the pedestrians actually get across? We'll figure that out with the community. I'm going to the school bash tonight to start the outreach for the roundabout because we're never done until it's done. And even after that, we can continue to improve. So I'm going to go back to you, Valida. You had a question? Okay.
Constraints around public parking lots. That still means no parking between the hours of like 2 a.m. and like 4 a.m.
Yeah, correct. No, I should have said no additional. So you can't do overnight at the four-way, but it's still no permit. Park as long as you want, except overnight. So I should have added no additional constraints at the four-way, the First and Elk, the fire station, the museum, all those public spaces. There is no management other than what we're already doing.
And parking, the like
Elk and Sopris. Oh, no, the alternating sides with snow removal, no changes. No changes. It's just the only changes up on these streets highlighted around the bus stops. Sure. Yes.
What is crafting RFP for release in October? Is that this October?
So we're finalizing the CDOT access permit now. They've given us a first draft. They have some things that we don't agree with. So the school district and the town are sending comments back before they finalize the access permit. What the access permit is a contract between the town and CDOT. It's a promise to CDOT. This is how we're going to do it. And they're going to hold us to that. The crafting of the RFP is based on that final access permit. That's what we have to design. So we're crafting the RFP, waiting for CDOT to finalize it. And we're doing that right now. And we expect to release the RFP for the design, not the construction, but the design of the roundabout in October. So then we'll select a design engineer to actually design it. And that's when we'll do additional outreach to get to the very particulars of how it lays on the ground. I'm sorry, request for qualifications or request for proposals. This is a request where engineers will give us a price to design it.
So January. Now you show up.
Yes, and we'll do everything we can to get the word out. The design of that. Well, I'm going to be there, but all you're going to see is that picture and pretty much these notes. And I will be taking any concerns about a particular of this current layout. This is likely not the final layout of the roundabout. So I think we did quick question and answer. So I'm going to transition to Jesse. Are there any other general transportation questions? Jim.
I'm still hearing a lot of negative feedback about the roundabout. One comment I hear and I've talked to a couple of folks about is that with that stop sign at Bellevue, there will be a line of cars going from that stop sign back through the traffic circle during different parts of the day. So in essence, instead of having cars who are idling at Red Lady, you're moving all of that pollution further into town by having roundabout.
Okay.
So I'm hearing a lot of that. I'm still hearing a lot of people say, why can't we do the turnout lane to school and the acceleration lane going up the hill instead of a roundabout? It changes the character of town. I guess one question I have, in regards to what I'm hearing is, but some folks say, well, it's too late, it's already a done deal. Is that the fact, or is it still open for discussion?
Nothing is a done deal. We're gonna go through design. We have guaranteed federal money to support, but council can always make their decisions, right? Until the concrete is poured. Even after the concrete poured, probably at much greater expense to change it. But council has complete control over that. And so I don't know if council wants to add anything, but there is no final until the concrete is poured, and then it becomes consequential to change it, but they can always change it.
Most of them I'm complaining about the roundabout, and I'm so excited to hear everything else. I mean, I'm still ingesting it. I do think in general, this is a general question. I think in general, there's a lot of things that are being thrown out where people feel like it's already been decided. And so going back to communication with the town, I think that's something we have to hit pretty hard, which is that these are just ideas that are being thrown out, but the fact that a compatible or competing idea isn't being explored and presented makes it feel like this has been decided and it's moving forward. And so you may not hear as much feedback as you would if people are thinking, okay, here's the 2 or 3 choices that we have, rather than it's a roundabout and that's what it's going to be.
So I want to be clear here. Council adopted the plan and gave the county and the town direction to use the roundabout as the safety solution for 135 when we put the grant in. That was adopted March 4th. And there was tremendous outreach from the transportation plan. Almost 2,000 people participated. And the consent at that time was to move with the roundabout. So there were alternatives. Going forward, now it would be a retraction. Council can always say stop, but we are proceeding with that adopted plan. And if everyone, Jim and Roxana, has concerns with that, come out. There isn't an alternative right now to the roundabout, but based on that outreach, and if there's a big groundswell, and council's going to want to know about it. And we can pause. There's 3 pauses in the design of the roundabout: 30%, 60, and 90. And that is percentage of fee spent, because that's getting more particular with the design. So we're going to do a lot of outreach in January, because that's the concept stuff. January, February, that's the 30%. And then we get to 90 or 60 and then 90. And so it gets harder and harder to change, but it isn't going to change. But right now I want to make clear, there isn't an alternative to the roundabout right now.
It's possible that we're hearing the negative because those people are still stuck in the negative, right? So whatever positive feedback we would have gotten, that their plan's moving ahead, and so you're going to hear more vocalization from people. But the comment that I made was also more related to the fact that that was me too, that I just wanted to put before, which was that we have to make it clear which decisions have been made and are moving forward, and how people can participate, and which ones have not, because I don't think that there's clarity. We're throwing out a lot of information.
Yeah, there is.
And they haven't participated in the steps that we have participated in order to integrate any of this. And so, even I get confused sometimes about where we are and what stage, and so, but still, thank you for clarifying that.
And thank you for the comments. That's just, we have to do a better job.
I want to clarify quickly why that one option of an acceleration lane and exit lane was abandoned.
She just explained it.
Can we do that? I mean, we really have a lot of stuff to cover, and I'm happy to do.
But I don't know if you want to go that.
Right, it was. Yeah, there's a big safety difference between the two, and it's all related to speed. I hear you on the stacking from Bellevue. That's our concern. The school's traffic engineer is different than the town's traffic engineer, which is different than CDOT. And everyone has that on their radar of how the two, and CDOT's going to give very clear instructions, because we're aware of that risk. So there may be minor improvements to Bellevue. Right now, no study indicates it's needed, but design just gets more fine-tuned. But the biggest difference between the two was travel choices on how we can use other streets in town and distribute traffic, and speed. One actually speeds traffic up, and that was the turn, high-speed turn, creating the median and acceleration lane. The roundabout is safest for all modes, and it actually processes the traffic in a safer way. And so that was the decision. I'm happy after the meeting to walk through the analytics, but I think we have so much on the agenda. Is that an okay answer for now, Danica?
There too, during, in the transportation plan itself, which is access from the navigation page, it explains the two alternatives, why one was chosen. But during lunch, we can get into more detail as well.
I like to just throw my hat.
Please.
I have been opposer of the roundabout from day one and still am. And so I'd like to jump on board with these guys and just say I've had a lot of people, and many people do think it's a done deal, especially after this $15 million front page story this last week about 3 roundabouts. And I just thought, are you effing kidding me? 3 now? So anyway, just have to throw my hat in the back.
Thank you.
Because I've been too quiet about it. For me, I've been very quiet about it.
Thank you.
You know, a good member of the transportation committee, like I felt I should be, and I'm just like starting to boil up. So I need to let you guys know I'm really boiled over here pretty soon, and just start talking to people about how I feel and what we can do to stop it.
Thank you for letting us know.
Thanks.
One other point that, apologies if it's in there, I don't have it memorized. How much communication and planning has there been around like interconnection of the communities? Like, is there, or is the boundary for the transportation plan really the town of CD? Like, are there conversations and ideas around connection between Mount CD and CD?
So we looked at inside the town. That's the answer. But as we did that, we worked with Mountain Express, we worked with RTA that expand, and we worked with CDOT. So the county obviously was a different plan, the 135 safety plan. So they were engaged with that. There's a follow-up study the town, the county, the mountain are all going to do. It's called the corridor plan for 135. And it will look very detailed on what's outside of it and how the transit system plays into it and how land uses in the county play into it. But the transportation plan, to answer your question, was looking inside the town. Right?
In terms of connecting CD and CD.
Right.
You said that's falling within a different venue?
They had a chance to participate and we actually engaged them, but the corridor plan, Mount Crested Butte is going to help fund. And they're going to be actively engaged because they're looking at areas outside of their town. We're going to fund it and the county is going to fund it. And we're actually asking the Crested Butte South Homeowners Association to participate as well. So that's coming.
All the electeds, that's great to see South the county as well. For the corridor plan.
Yep.
And that is still in development.
We're drafting the scope now and we're going to present the outline to council on the 7th of October.
Is that publicly available?
It's not finalized. It will be in the packet. Yes.
I apologize, Ian.
Yeah, I think I heard 2 things. I just wanted to repeat back that I think is important. What I'm hearing is we need to be very clear about where we're at in the process in terms of the decision making to clarify what decisions have been made, what opportunities are going forward. And also, I think we need to not take for granted that people have paid with as much attention to detail that maybe council and staff has, what decisions we've made and why. And so even if we have, you know, last spring spent a lot of time looking at different alternatives, we shouldn't assume that people have paid attention to that the way we have, and we need to catch the community up and go back to that and not take it for granted. So those are the 2 things that I'm taking away from this conversation.
Maybe a simple webpage of that very hot topic. So like this decision, like these alternatives, here's why, like super crisp and easy, because a lot of people aren't going to read through the 50
material.
This is great feedback, and as we craft the RFP for the engineer, there's a big community outreach piece of that scope. And I love that idea, specific to the roundabout, right? Because we know that it isn't designed yet. And the intent is to keep the community engaged as it's designed. And so that's a great idea, and we'll put that in the scope of work.
All of the applications.
Right. So just as a reminder, council has instructed staff every single March to come back to them. And as we talk about implementation of the transportation plan, do that in March and make sure the community is very aware that we review what has been done and review what's coming with them and the community. So that is great feedback, and that's already intended. We can always do better.
And this is exactly why we want to give updates on each of the plans, to do a temperature check with you all, so we know what needs to be addressed and where can we do better, where we need to focus our efforts. And before we switch into historic preservation, Malika, welcome. I want to do a quick introduction, and the icebreaker question we asked everybody is, what did you think was most effective this summer in terms of all the different outreach? The block parties, the coffee with council, the surveys, all of the above. Did anything stand out to you?
Block parties were a great thing.
Awesome. Yeah, and you're not alone, I would say. I get, anytime this community gets together, it's fun. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys all for your time again today. So I just wanted to remind everybody, I'm gonna quickly do this so that, well, I thought I was going to, so that you can see. Here we go. There we go.
I'm just gonna, before Jesse gets started, we're not gonna give you a break. There's a lot of information. So this is just here. I just want to say you're always.
Yes, you should.
You need to go to the restroom, please go. There's coffee up here. Feel free to hand up and do your personal needs. Sadly, we don't have a time to give you a group break, but please, you're more than welcome to take a personal break. So I just wanted to remind people of that because there's a lot today.
Okay, so I just wanted to remind everybody what the challenge and the goal for the historic preservation plan is, just to ground our discussion for today. So the challenge we were presented for the historic preservation out of the compass was we fought hard to protect our historic buildings, but our newer buildings are starting to look all the same. So the goal that was drafted by this committee, the Historic Preservation Plan Committee, Council Bozar, the community, was to ensure that the town's architectural identity is a reflection of Crested Butte's deep sense of community and its evolution over time. So hopefully what I described to you in a minute is a reflection of that. So this is just a quick, some images from the plan. It was put out as a draft in early June, and we've tweaked it and morphed over, again, comments from community, Bozar, Town Council. And so this is with the recommended alternative. And so I'll hop right into that recommended alternative now. So with the draft that was released in early June, there were three draft alternatives with that. And we heard feedback, as Mayor Billick said, Mel and Miles. We heard a ton of feedback from all the different groups of people. And so we tried to distill that down. And we've landed on basically alternative number 2. So I'll walk through that. The majority of folks that responded to the survey and feedback support the idea of a second period of significance that would recommend preserve the recreation ski era. So the 1960s to maybe 1980s. We need to do a lot more. Speaking to what Roxana was asking about, that's not a done deal. We met with those potential homeowners from that group and had a great discussion. Obviously not everyone was at that meeting. There would be a lot more outreach and survey work needed before we say it's a done deal. These are the homes. So that would be a project for next year or even 2026. So just so you are all clear. We heard support on the idea of the local historic district boundary being reduced down with a buffer around it. So basically around the National Historic District or the core of town. So core business and also core residential. We also heard support for leaving things where they are from an FAR perspective. We didn't hear from anyone, oh, make it easier for people to get more FAR or anything like that. So that's why that line is kind of where it is currently. Floor area ratio, so how we measure square footage in town. We did hear, which kind of intersects with the community plan a little bit, people might be interested in incentives, which I'll get to in a minute, which is the bar at the end, if it were for affordable housing reasons or for a different reason. So not specific to historic preservation though. What we also heard is the majority of people, once we kind of explain things, they were supportive of the idea of boosting the regulations regarding demolition by neglect. So we always use this building across the street as an example, the White House with the orangey red trim, where no one's been here in many years. They're not doing anything to it. We've reached out to them because there's damage to the building. They're kind of willfully letting it rot into the ground. And so we want to kind of prevent what's happening at that building for both our existing period of significance, and then if we do adopt the new period, it would protect that period as well. And then we also heard support for, let's look at our demolition rules that are in place right now, and do they make sense? Do they need to be bolstered in any other way? We heard support from folks to have allow more flexibility with regards to style, as long as it meets mass, scale, and form regulations. So outside of that historic core area, so outside of the buffer, allow bigger flexibility. There was some caution from people saying not a floodgate opening, so maybe like have a little restraint. So with our recommended alternative, we've tried to craft language for how that looks. And moving forward, how do we look at the guidelines in 2025 when that's slated to be looked at? Again, another discussion for that. We also heard more flexibility with materials outside of the historic district and buffer, was supported by the majority of folks that responded for a variety of reasons, kind of to connect with Dana's plan, the climate action plan. Also thinking about the wildland urban interface fire codes, the FEMA codes. So to talk about all those things together. And then as far as incentives go, we heard from the majority of people that people were in favor of the idea of, if there's a new period of significance, give folks from each of the periods of significance some sort of benefit for having those historic buildings and being able to maintain them and also stabilize, because we know how expensive it is. And for instance, in our current period of significance, you all know there's a lot of examples around town of little sheds that start to lean like this. The Forest Queen might have been a really good example of a really big building that we were worried about for that. So a lot of people in favor of that. And then also the idea of administrative level reviews. So rather than have everything go to BOZAR for either insubstantial or formal review, is there a way that staff members can do some of that to take the burden off of BOZAR and to help kind of move the process along? There's also been discussions in the design charrette and also through the historic preservation plan of the idea of pre-approved plans. So that might be another idea that we could look at. Is there an ADU design that would be vetted through BOZAR that maybe if someone can fit that on their lot, that's something that they can just move forward with easily. And then finally, the idea of yard and bulk. So to talk about yard and bulk is just setbacks, heights, widths. Those are kind of the ideas of yard and bulk, zoning requirements, in other words, for people with historic homes. We already kind of give those for the buildings within the period of significance. It's called conditional waivers, but we would look at allowing those for that new period of significance if we were to allow that. So this is what we've landed on and what you'll see in the draft historic preservation plan with the recommended alternative. I wanted to open it up, but first, just as a quick reminder, these are our success measures. I'm not going to read through these, but we wanted to show that we feel like the recommended alternative really does help to meet and support all of those success measures, which is an important feature that we want to make sure we distill those down through these to make sure we're holding ourselves to the rules we set forth in the beginning stages of our plan. So I wanted to just tell you what's next. We'll be taking whatever comments you all have today to the town council on Bozar for a joint work session on October 7th. And then after that, it would go to Bozar at the end of October if the wheels are in motion. And then after that, it would then go to town council based upon the recommendation. So the one thing that I really wanted to tell you all is the draft plan is a big document. So obviously I know you didn't have time to read that all today. So after reviewing this quick review today, and if you have time to look through it, I'm happy to meet with all of you if you have things like that get stuck in your mind or you just want to talk through. So reach out to me anytime for a coffee, for a walk, whatever works for you all. And then I'll open it up to questions. Nope. Maybe. I know, sorry. There we go.
For the Lucent design standards in the non-core area, when we talk about flat roof buildings, what's the magnitude of flexibility in design at this point with that feature determination?
That's a really good question. So we haven't nailed down what exactly does that look like. And the committee really wasn't comfortable with saying these specific designs because that feels kind of arbitrary. So it really needs to be vetted, and that would happen when we kind of talk through the guidelines. Now we do have some recommendations for like roof pitches, for porch details, for the things we see, fenestration. So those are kind of talked through in the recommended alternative in the plan. And that's a really great question because the committee had things where they were comfortable with maybe looking at roof pitches. Can flat roofs be allowed on an alley structure? Right now, a gabled roof has always been the recommendation for buildings in town. That just needs to be something that's talked through. What's that? Well, that's true. That's true. In the 1970s.
To build on that, mass scale and form and strict adherence. An example of pitched roof versus a flat roof. You measure the height different. You don't go absolutes because then the pitched roof will have more, or flat roof would have more volume. And so hiring the right architects, so the committee knows that, and mass scale and form is going to drive the variety and protect the town. But the devil is in the details, and that's the next step. If the council agrees that in concept, mass scale and form outside of the historic core is still critical, when we do the zoning next year and do the design standards and guidelines, that's where the specifics, and there's going to be as much outreach now as there is then. It's like the roundabout design. As we start doing that, we will engage the community and show what these different metrics would do. But based on roof type, the height measurements allowance would change, but that would be figured out next year.
And I think that's a good example of sort of the higher policy level place that we're at right now, and where that work will continue as we get into more detail, which is why we wanted to give the update to this group to just, like transportation, do a temperature check and see if anything stands out. And that, Jim, that's a great question. So any other questions on kind of the high policy level status of the reservation?
So the last success measure that represents, clearly represent community design expectations. What do you mean by represent?
That was one of our, and it's kind of an abbreviated version of the full success measure, but it basically through this plan, we want to make sure that we're clearly representing the community's expectations. So one of the critiques of our code, our municipal code, zoning code specifically, and our design guidelines right now is it almost takes a PhD to try and figure out how to design a house. We want to take that away. And so through the historic preservation plan, we want to make sure that it is clear so that when we move forward to updating that zoning code and the guidelines, that then they're very clear so that anybody coming in can read the document and say, I get it, I understand.
And wherever we can, replace words with graphics so that people can see and understand what we mean.
Right.
And so get clear instructions from this, so when we do the design standards update, they'll be much more intuitive and much more understandable.
Questions, comments on historic preservation before we get into climate action? Okay, well, let's keep moving, and no, I think Dan will be our
Yeah.
virtual presenter.
I got it, Dan. I'm just gonna say I'll move forward in your slides if you want to just tell me when to advance.
Yeah, you got it. Thank you. All right, everybody. I'm really excited to give you an update today because we're really starting to get into what I like to call the meat and potatoes of climate action planning. But first, I'll start by reminding everybody what our refined goal is for the climate action plan, and that is that Crested Butte will act on the urgency of climate change by setting the example of what is possible for mountain communities to take responsibility for our climate impacts and strategically drive down Crested Butte's greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, Mel. So since I've seen y'all, we've gone through and refined some of our success measures. So this is the list we've landed on at, for now. And we're, again, like everybody has been echoing throughout all these presentations, we're still working on things. If there's feedback, that's great. Next slide, Mel. We've also identified, you saw on the previous slide, one of our success measures was provides co-benefits. Co-benefits are auxiliary benefits to potential actions we might propose. A lot of the actions we've proposed are focused on emissions reductions, but those do have inherent benefits beyond just reducing emissions. So these were some of the ones that Brendel Group, our consultant working with us on the climate action plan, have recommended for our community. Next slide, Mel. Thank you. So I just want to remind everybody that what informs, excuse me, what informs our proposed actions is really our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And y'all have seen this before. We have refined our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. When we brought this to you before, we had some challenges with some methodology changes between years. And with council's direction, we did work with Brendel to go back and really refine and what we call normalize between inventory years to make the data more comparable and really reduce the skewing of data. So previously with the methodology changes, we saw a 16% increase from 2017 to 2022 overall in our emissions. Now that we've normalized some data, added in some factors that weren't included in 2017, we now only see a 5% increase, still going up, but it's much less, and we think that that refinement to the methodology really helped to show the true picture of how our emissions are changing. So the only thing I want to note about this slide, the proportions haven't changed since the refinement of our emissions inventory. So we can see there's blue, yellow, green, yellow being energy, whether that's gas or electricity. Blue is transportation and green is waste or wastewater. And we see that a majority of our energy emissions comes from buildings, and the majority of that is from residential buildings. So using that information, we crafted some proposed strategies on addressing emissions through buildings and other subsequent areas that through survey information outreach we heard was really important to the community as well. And we also saw the trends didn't change either. The reasons for the increases in our emissions still being an increase in natural gas usage over the years, a minor increase in vehicle miles traveled, and then solid waste generation as well. And then I will say that as far as a reduction, we are seeing a little bit of a reduction in electricity use, which is good. Hopefully that means our buildings are becoming more efficient. And we are seeing significant reductions in emissions factors. So how much fossil fuel it takes to produce our electricity or gas, which is inherently a fossil fuel. But next slide, Mel. So I want to call out specifically the climate action survey results in that section in the navigation survey, because we had some interesting results. Overall, we asked folks questions about different sectors and where the community might have ambition or tolerance to increase or decrease action in those areas. And we asked about energy supply, so where we get our energy, waste and what we're doing about that, and then how our buildings produce energy and use fossil fuels. And interestingly, and unsurprisingly, we saw that most of the community, based on the survey and based on feedback throughout the summer, are super supportive of increasing action on energy supply and waste. They want to see a lot more done in this community around those sectors. Where we saw some hesitation and reticence was around building energy use. So that was really interesting and is going to prove a challenging conversation, I think, at the council level, deciding how we take action around buildings, knowing that they are our most significant in boundary emitters. So that'll be just something to think about. Next slide, Mel. So I do want to preface this slide and say that this wasn't quite presented this way in the packet, and I apologize. It's just because Brendel Group, ahead of our committee meeting, we decided to package the proposed actions in a different way that's just a little bit more digestible than a giant list of actions. So really what we're proposing and what Brendel Group is recommending, based on our emissions inventory, based on feedback, is a few different things. So under different sectors, we have 4 major sectors where we can really make an impact on emissions and other environmental concerns. First and foremost is building decarbonization. So really reducing the amount of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions, CO2e, that our buildings are producing. And we do that, the biggest opportunity we really have in that area is reducing emissions from our existing buildings. We have many historic buildings, some older buildings that are just not energy efficient and also use gas as a main source of heating and energy. And we know that that produces emissions. So that's really our biggest opportunity, alongside maybe some zoning code changes to support the community plan. Some others under renewable energy supply, the town doesn't necessarily control how renewable our energy is of the grid, but we can really push on our partners to help increase the amount of renewable energy we have, whether that's locally or at the utility scale. We've proposed several actions around reducing landfill waste, around composting, pay-as-you-throw programs, just as some examples. And that has been a huge, we've heard that all summer. I hear that all the time, and through the survey, we know that's really important to the community. And then we didn't recommend any new actions for transportation. And that's because, as we've been communicating all summer, our community is fortunate enough to have this really great transportation mobility plan that does focus on tactics that reduce emissions. That's de-emphasizing vehicles, providing alternative modes of transit, and other types of actions like that that really support, I think, reducing emissions. So there really were no additional actions proposed there. So Mel, if you'll go to the next slide.
Dana, go through a couple more slides and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah, thank you. So I only put this up here. I'm not going to go through the slide, just to show what was presented to you in the packet. And we can discuss this. This is a proposed list. We're going to be talking about this with council and framing that for council. We've got some events coming up where we really do want to hear your feedback. I do want to emphasize that this meeting is about the higher level trade-offs and really focusing on the community plan for the specific meeting and how climate action can support the community plan and the zoning code changes that might be proposed to that plan. So we can get into questions, but I just do want to make sure it stays fairly high level. Next slide, Mel. So we took those strategies, and just to give you a little sense of where the biggest impact is, we can rank them as a number of different ways, but because council has directed staff and Brendel Group to focus on emissions, we rank them by emissions. And if we look at which strategies are most impactful, kind of the top 2 that I'm focusing on are reducing emissions from existing buildings or residential buildings. That's where we see we can have the highest impact of emission reduction by focusing on those sectors, followed by focusing on renewable energy, looking at waste and what we can do there, and other such proposed actions. Next slide, Mel. So another way we can rank them is by cost effectiveness. So how much money do we need to spend to reduce a metric ton of CO2? And council has been very forward about saying that they wanted to see this information. And what I find interesting about both of these analyses is that no matter where you slice it, our biggest opportunity or bang for our buck, as some people say, even by cost effectiveness, knowing that we will spend, we won't say a small amount of money, but the least amount of money ranked this way by still going after emissions in existing buildings. So I thought that was really interesting. This ranking is not to deprioritize the other actions. It's just to show if we're looking at emissions, and that's really what we're going after with this climate action plan, that's the biggest area of opportunity for change. Next slide, Mel. So what's next? Like I said, this plan is fully in development mode. We have not decided anything. We are recommending actions at this point, which is exciting. I think that's what people kind of understand the most about climate action planning. But I'm really excited to be hosting a climate action, a climate poetry slam / open mic night at the Eldo next Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. We welcome anybody of all ages, and we hope that people will bring poems or songs or spoken word to talk about how they're feeling about the environment or how they care about this town, and also provide feedback on these proposed actions. And then, as everyone said, we'll be going to Town Council in Beaux-Arts on October 7th to really dig into a rough draft of the climate action plan and these proposed actions. And then the climate action plan is scheduled to go out for public comment from October 21st to November 18th. And then hopefully we'll be moving into some refinement and adoption phasing in mid-December. So happy to take any questions for just a few moments. And I'll just add, sorry about that. Yeah, thank you. For the folks in the room, if you could speak up, if you could speak up when you ask a question, it's hard to hear online. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Would you mind going back to the slide that had the survey results? So the less action or Crested Butte is doing enough building energy, right? Then can you go to the next slide? So it looks like most of the draft strategies, is that true? Are there things that people seem to not want?
That is correct. That is the challenge. It's I think with some of the other plans, it's been fortunate that the community is really supportive of the alternative that's landed on. And this is going to be a challenging discussion at council level and the community level, because there are actions that we know improve livability and we know protect the environment. I'll just use waste as an example. It doesn't have the most significant emissions reduction impact as we measure it, but it is something that's super important to the community and they fully support. However, it's not the biggest area of impact as far as, and again, strictly focusing on if we want to drive down emissions within our community, our buildings are the biggest culprit. And so I think folks are hesitant to see more action, especially around after the code change around new buildings. That's been really interesting too, because where we saw kind of the biggest contention was around existing buildings, but we really haven't passed much regulation around existing buildings at this point. So that'll be kind of interesting to understand how the community, maybe like I think maybe the leader, Nicole, mentioned that just some vocabulary or maybe not fully understanding the question, it's possible. But yes, I'll kind of answer your question. These recommendations are based off of how do we reduce emissions, and the community seems to be pushing back on that a little bit.
Do you think that's because the community thinks that the town's gonna come in and like in their existing house and be like, you have to replace these windows?
Yes. Yeah, which
on you.
So, do you guys have a plan to help?
Yes. Yeah.
That you're thinking, how to help people make their vote?
Yes. These proposed actions include incentives, programmings, and I think there's some education to the community that the town, first of all, we only have like 3 to 5 redevelopments a year, and I might be overestimating on that. So this would be focusing on existing buildings, redeveloping. The town cannot come into your home and say you have to do this if you do not trigger some sort of permitting or public process. So we can't come into your home and say you have to change your stove, your gas stove to an electric without some sort of, if you've got a new permit for it or something like that. So the change would be very slow, very similar with the new building regulations around electrification. Again, we only do 3 to 5 new buildings a year here within the town boundary. So I think there is that shock factor of like, oh my gosh, the town's going to come in and pull out all my appliances. That's not how this works. Yeah, thanks for that question.
Yeah, so I want to add, and you know what Dana is saying, one of the strategies is incentives. And I just want to kind of just give an example. So I run the Green Deed program. One of the opportunities is rebates after you've gone through weatherization. And so I just had, this is just an awesome example because the rebates trigger more motivation in terms of what is being done. So I just had a commercial building, they have 2 deed restricted units on top, and a commercial building just put on an 11.2 kilowatt photovoltaic system. And the cost was way more. It was both on for commercial, and the offset for the residential was about 20% of that whole bill. But I mean, like it's amazing, right? Like they just they invested into this community, put in renewable energies, and it was triggered in part by the rebate opportunities. So it's huge.
Thank you. I think that's a great way to point out how some of the tools like incentives can help us navigate some of those big trade-offs that I want to point out. Let's go Roxanne and then Jim.
Well, so I was gonna piggyback on what said.
Can you be a little louder, Savannah?
Sorry, I will try. I've never been asked to be louder. That's the first time. I will say that I was having a similar thought, but being on Beaux-Arts, I wanted to throw a little more granular perspective on it, which is, I know it doesn't seem like it's impactful because it gets triggered when there's a certain amount of demolition, but if you have, say, gas in your house and you really appreciate it and like having it, if you come back and do a significant change to your house, you get, I think, right, the way that the law does is that it triggers your house to have to accommodate an all electrical.
Not today.
Not today.
That might be a consideration in the future.
Right, and so I think those are the particular sticking points that people may be pushing back on. So I would be really interested in seeing a survey that's much more specific about what is triggering people's kind of resistance to this, because the other one may be a fear of financial imposition on the homeowner, that if you have to meet certain, even if you want to just like add a bedroom to your house, you're suddenly going to have to like improve the R value of your entire house, and this is going to cost X, Y, and Z. So it may be that it's in those small misunderstandings that you're getting that resistance.
Or we haven't thought through the incentive.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I think a few people have said it, but the devil's in the details, and we won't decide exactly how to implement each recommendation in the plan when we decide to tackle existing buildings. If we decide to do that, there will be a discussion with council and with the community to understand what's the best incentives we can offer, what would be the impact of what we're recommending, and really getting into those details as we implement the plan. Similar with transportation, there's been many meetings about parking since the transportation plan has been implemented to understand how can we tweak that for the community.
But just from a scheduling perspective, what's in the compass is the building modifications to the existing buildings, if council directs us to do so, would be next year as well, and that's the building code. We update, council directed us to update the building code every 3 years. It's scheduled to be updated next year. And so these considerations would be in a very specific conversation with contractors in the community as the specific building code gets developed. Again, think of planning as 30,000 feet down to the curb. We have to have community input all the way to the curb, but we need guidance to get there to be prudent with our monies and resources. So the building code is going to be updated next year. The extent of that will be guided by this and continued engagement.
And to Troy's point, there's, as Dana pointed out, a lot of upcoming opportunities to engage on this issue. If we want to bring that slide up again and again.
Has it been determined, or is it possible to determine what aspect of existing utilities contribute most to global climate change problem? In other words, is it furnaces, is it insulation, is it windows, is it north-facing windows, is it unshuttered windows, etc.?
Great question.
Yeah, great question.
I'm sorry, can somebody repeat that one for me? That was a little hard to hear.
Yeah, Dana, Jim was asking if it's been determined or if there's any estimates or research on what aspects of existing buildings contribute most to our emissions, whether it's windows, furnaces, insulation, that sort of thing.
Oh, that's a fair question, Jim. I think what I hear you asking, and correct me, is what part of the building uses the most energy and creates the most emissions. I would say that because, first I'll answer higher level, because electricity, the energy intensity to make electricity is changing, and the types of energy we use to create electricity is changing, we see fewer emissions from buildings in certain areas. This is caveated with what utility you're on and how much coal they use. We see those buildings creating less emissions over time. Even if your building exists already, if you're electric, you use less emission or create less emissions over time because your utility is using less coal over time. Buildings that are hooked exclusively up to natural gas, those emissions never change. Natural gas is not getting much cleaner. There is a caveat, it is getting a little bit less carbon intensive, but barely, not at the same rate as electricity is. And so those buildings that remain on natural gas will forever produce the same amount of emissions. So it doesn't reduce our emissions any to keep those buildings using natural gas forever. Now, as far as what part of the building, like windows or doors, like what efficiencies can we put in that building to make it more efficient? That's very case by case. And I think it just depends on how old the building is. You might have really crappy door seals, and that could be a huge area of energy loss, or your windows are super old, and that could be a big area where you're losing a lot of heat in the winter. It really depends on the building.
One thing,
I was just gonna say, one thing we're talking about in exactly that realm is, as one of the incentives or of the actions, it being a home energy assessment, either required or suggested, basically is one of the actions. And through that home energy assessment, really where you identify what are the fun things that will, because it is a incentive.
One of the things I was going to mention was that currently under the 2021 building code adoption is that town is paying for an energy assessment of any level 1 or 2 remodels. Level 3, they have to pay for it themselves. So those levels are set forth in the building code, but it basically goes through the home to kind of help us have data also, but also to just give the homeowners some ideas that they want to, they're already doing a re-roof, well, maybe they want to add some insulation here or there.
So our Board for Resource Engineering group and the city of Aspen has paid us to do an amenity load study, is I think what we called it. But basically hot tubs, pools, snow melt, we don't have a lot of pools. But those things use just vastly more energy than a house. Going to the outside, there's, it's just leaking forever. And, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the houses that had those things attached to them were just they were a different little ton way out on the other side of the track.
Does that include the sidewalk?
Yes, oh yeah, that is the most big one.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. That exterior energy use is a big one, and I think Gunnison County, I read something that is taking some pretty aggressive action. I'm looking at there.
The county did ban snow melt, correct?
I'm not sure what they did. I know they have been taking some action on it. And I do want to keep us moving along to get to our community plan, but easily up.
And just to add to what Dana said with regards to if you're in the house and then you have natural gas, like a specific mix of natural gas and electricity use, then what Jesse said also is then you look at weatherizing the house, and then it's depending on the house situation. Typically, air sealing and so adding insulation will add the most, and then you look at heating systems depending on how old they are. If it makes sense to replace them and to electrify those. So that's kind of like a list of priorities that you see continuously in the energy assessment report recommendations.
I think one thing that's important as you go through the plans is understanding how interlinked the plans and these issues become. It's very difficult to look at any of these, and I'll use especially climate as a standalone, we can fix everything by just looking at this plan. The conversation of snowmelt as being a great evil, when you look at it in terms of accessibility, there are certain things that snowmelt may be a great evil, but there are certain times without snowmelt, you may not have an accessible building. And I'm not saying that it can't be done, but to look at any of these, I'll say transportation or historic or climate as a standalone, we're doing a disservice. I mean, when we bought our house, we had electric baseboard, we had a furnace, we had a wood stove, we had radiant ceilings, we had, I don't know what we had in it. It was very easy, if you will, to scrape all of that out and make it more efficient because it didn't touch anything else. Historically, we had to do it all from the inside because it's really constructed. So I couldn't simply say, now we're going to rip the wall out when we take this furnace out. So I think it is important as we continue to go through, and I always appreciate that we do go through this update of all the plans, because it's very important to look at all of these as one. I mean, snow melt, what a terrible thing. Unless we're trying to get people safely in and out of buildings without, I mean, we can do it. Right, we can do a great job of plowing, scraping, salting our sidewalks. By the time we build up 2 inches, 3 inches, you can't get in the building if you have it.
And what does that do to the character?
Right, and so this is an example of a really tough conversation. So I think, Ed, thank you as a transportation, because in the transportation plan, we heard accessibility and life safety. A lot of people are breaking their legs, hurting their ankles, and everyone's seniors. Mobility is really, really important. And I think Ed's point is just understanding that we